Hello, thanks for tuning into this episode. Before we start, FinTech Focus TV is brought to you by Harrington Starr, global leaders in financial technology recruitment. Head to the Harrington Starr website and check the links below so you can download the latest copy of the Financial Technologist magazine. And also, we've got the TradFi and DeFi Era of Convergence documentary coming up. If you're interested in the merger of the two, please get in touch. Thanks a lot and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby. Today I am absolutely delighted to have in the studio Duncan Trenholme from TP ICAP. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. Nice
to
be here.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming. We've had a long chat beforehand because I think both of us are super excited about the subject today. You're the co-head of digital assets over at TP ICAP, a business I know well, and I think this is a really exciting venture for you guys to be moving into. We've got loads to unpack into it, and I could be asking questions, as we've already found out, for about 15 hours. We're going to try and compress everything into half an hour or so. As to kick off, Duncan, talk to us a bit about your background.
So I studied physics, actually, and then ended up at ICAP on their graduate scheme back in 2008, which was a very interesting time.
Yeah,
joining a financial services firm. They did a graduate program, you rotated on different desks, and I ended up on an equities desk doing equity derivatives, which took up the next sort of 8 to 9 years of my career, like establishing myself in that industry. And then in sort of 2017, as many people do, went down a rabbit hole on crypto and Bitcoin, just in sort of personal interest.
That's where it started, just from you being interested in the space,
Yeah, well actually mostly it came from my wife. She's very much sort of encouraged me to read really widely in terms of, I was probably at a lull in my career, I'd say, and she said you should go out and broaden your horizons a little bit and think. And then I stumbled across crypto and Bitcoin. My colleague I was working with at the time had something similar, so we were delving into it, and really quite quickly it was, well, this is going to change quite a few things, not just crypto and Bitcoin being like this new, very interesting tech, but sitting there working at a financial intermediary sort of thing. Well, this is probably going to have impact on what we do as a business. So, I mean, what we did with that, we actually sent an email to our COO at the time.
The Jerry Maguire moment, was it?
That sort of thing, yeah. Basically saying, look, we assume you're probably already looking at this. Here are some of our thoughts. And credit to him, he said, well, why don't you come and stop by the office, have a chat. And meanwhile, at the time, our firm in 2017 was starting to receive a bit of client interest across the organisation. We're a global company, and some in the APAC region, some in the US, and our now CEO said we should put a working group in place just to try and assess what's going on. Myself and my colleague Simon, we co-head the business now, sort of put our hands up and said we'd like to be on that working group, and
that's where it started.
Yeah.
That's amazing, isn't it? So talk to us through that. So in 2017, you've got this group. The two of you are starting to see this thing, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. And I think if you look at it, well, certainly if I think back to then, and I'm talking to traditional finance businesses, and I'm hearing this crypto thing coming through, I'm thinking about people looking at get-rich-quick schemes and money laundering and all this sort of stuff. But you saw beyond that straight away.
Well, I wouldn't say straight away, right? It's probably one of those things, maybe like the internet, right? So I think in the early stages, it was probably too young for kind of when that first hit, but people are trying to figure out what is this, what does it mean, what's the impact it's going to have, and 20 years on, when everybody uses it on a day-to-day basis, it's like instantaneous, like, well, it's obvious what that does, right? Yeah. So I think, at its heart, it was, this is about transferring value over the internet natively. You're going to be able to automate a lot of things. And really what I think crystallized in our mind is TP ICAP as an organization had seen sort of electronification of markets. And that was very much a kind of front office evolution. We went from voice-based, phone-based matching and execution onto electronic trading systems, using that type of technology, right? And on the post-trade side of things, around how trades are settled, how assets are stored and reconciled, that hadn't, in our mind, had the same kind of step change. So it quickly became the narrative internally that, this tokenization using crypto and blockchain technology is really that kind of evolution, but on the post-trade side, right? You're talking about how assets are stored, how they can be transferred, and then, how you can use smart contracts to automate some of that life cycle. And I think the value prop is about better risk management, automation, which leads to efficiencies and cost savings, right? And also, what benefits will organizations get if everything is on the same technology stack instead of being the way that finance has evolved with
Frankenstein's monster, effectively.
Right, exactly. And you've got different asset classes that evolved at different times with different kind of models from a settlement and storage perspective, right? And you've now got
a tech perspective.
Right? And there's huge efficiencies you could get if those were kind of connected slightly better or on the same stack, right? So we, as an organization, thought, well, you've got this going on at the bottom, which is this new technology that can do this, and these new assets that are native to that, like crypto assets, which are really, in our mind, the first assets on this technology, right? So we think, we're, as the world's largest interdealer broker, about markets, liquidity, execution, and helping do that in a sort of an efficient manner. So we either sit there and think, well, what better place to experiment than to try and build a business in crypto to start with, so that we understand the technology, you get to learn by doing, and then if we're right about our long-term view, you've kind of built this muscle memory in crypto, you understand blockchain tech, you've built this infrastructure, and hopefully you can then repurpose that.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
For other assets, right?
And that long-term view is that sort of infrastructure then moves across into all the other asset classes.
Yeah, I mean, the way we think about it at TP ICAP is we're one of the interesting things about us as a business is we're global. Yeah. So we operate across all time zones, all financial markets. And B, we're not asset class specific. So we have a big global broking division. That's our main one with, what you'd expect, equities, credits, rates, historically kind of dealer to dealer kind of markets. We have a big energy and commodities franchise. Over the last 5 to 10 years, we've branched into sort of agency buy side, and we have a solutions division which is focused on data essentially. So we have this breadth across asset classes, and the key thing that I think I'm sure you've come up across is no one really knows where tokenization is going to take hold first, right? We know that these crypto assets, they exist, and investors want to get exposure to them, they want to trade them. That wave of adoption has been building, and it's not linear. We have waves, and then we have, like, now we're heading into a quieter time in the market. So we know that's there, but you see all this experimentation in the market, right? Let's take a bond, let's put that on Ethereum, let's try and automate like the life cycle of the bond. How about we try and do an equity? How about we tokenize gold and put it on this system, right? And it's hard, right? It's hard at first, and the reason it's hard is because for a market to work, you need participants, right? For participants to be there, people have to have some basic infrastructure in place.
And use cases.
Use cases as well, right? So, we have this belief that everyone needs a digital wallet, okay? And retail, that's quite easy to do. You can download one and set one up, right? If you're an institution, it's much harder. You go through a big due diligence process, you assess the market, you do like a assessment on securities and controls, you've got to understand the company structure, you've got to understand their regulation, they've got to have a track record of doing it. And that process of picking a custodian or a digital wallet provider is lengthy, right? And the more regulated you are as an institution, the longer that process will take. Once people have that, it's a fundamental building block for using digital assets. And really the only thing driving that at the moment, like the only use case for that is we need to service clients in crypto. So you say, well, we've got a digital bond, and they go, well, why would I do that instead of a normal bond? Well, eventually when everyone's using this system, it's going to be cheaper, right? And regulators will be able to plug into real-time updates of who's holding the bond, and all the compliance will be automated, and the asset itself will say, oh, I can't settle there because actually I'm not permissioned in this country, and I know that this wallet holder is based in this country. But we're not there yet, right? So right now it's like, well, why would I do it right now?
It's confidence.
And that's difficult. But what we think is happening is crypto is like that kind of Trojan horse driving this adoption. It's forcing executives and C-suite members to say, we need to make a decision here. Like, clients want access to crypto, we need to figure out how to do that. And the key is, I think, that once people are there and they've got crypto products, it's then going to be a case of, well, you've now got a digital wallet. Without even knowing it, you can hold assets that are based on blockchain tech, right? And then you're seeing all this innovation across the market of all these people trying to do it with bonds or equities, or do it with asset backs like precious metals and things like this. And the ones that get it right, investors are going to be like, well, why don't I hold a digital bond alongside my Ethereum holding in my digital wallet? Or why don't I hold a gold-backed token? And then suddenly they're going to be like, well, this is great. I've got all these asset classes on the same technology. And that's when we're really going to start to sort of materialize the benefits from the system.
So that's sort of, I guess, digital assets team that you're creating at the moment. It starts with digital assets and then can spread out so much more once people recognise the power of what we're talking about here. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, we've been, if you know where you think the market is heading in 10 years, right? Yeah. The question we asked as a business is, how do we get to that stage? Because you need to have some wins in the short term to sort of build and compound your business as you move. So kind of have this 3-stage strategy in a way. And the first was actually completely away from blockchain and crypto, which is sort of bizarre in itself, but investors coming to this space, by nature of the fact that crypto and blockchain tech is new and there's a curve there to get up to speed on it, you've seen a whole host of products appear in the market, which is essentially using TradFi tech, like what exists currently, to give people access to crypto. So what I mean by that is like cash settled futures, which are a product well used across finance, but ones that reference Bitcoin, right? Like what we saw on some of the kind of big exchanges, right? Or people creating equities that track crypto, or people starting to go, well, let's do over-the-counter derivatives like a Bitcoin MDF or something like that. And what that means is you can get exposure to crypto, but do it through the old system. And that's easier to get approved, implement, because you're doing it on a system that you already use day to day. So when we thought about building our business, it's like, well, first, we think the majority of investor demand in the short term will be on these products, because it's just it's like a path of least resistance, right? It's like, we want exposure to Bitcoin, option being hold Bitcoin physical. How do we do that? Well, there's a lot of hurdles to get to that point. What about if we do a cash settled future? I mean, we trade cash settled futures day in, day out on equities or whatever, right? So there's one that's referencing crypto. So, and I think over the last 3 years that has largely been true and played out like that. The early demand TP ICAP have seen is from our traditional customer base, so banks, asset managers, hedge funds, commodity trading firms. They usually land on, well, let's trade this sort of crypto derivative product to start because it's easy to implement. And once they're on that journey, they then go, well, the next natural thing is to hold the spot, right, and trade the spot. And that's the second part of our strategy, which is the trading platform we're launching with a few different partners who custody digital assets. And that's this infrastructure piece. So we can trade crypto, but in our minds, just a blockchain-based asset. And then once you've gone...
Just demystifying it, isn't it, effectively, when you're talking about that.
And then once you get that up and running, you can start looking at, well, there are other types of assets, maybe existing asset classes, same tech. Let's start using that on the same infrastructure.
It's a really interesting sort of pathway that you guys have been on with that, because, again, we spoke beforehand about TP ICAP being a very traditional based business, and we've been speaking a lot as a business about this era of convergence of traditional and decentralised finance, and actually what you're talking about there is a journey effectively that becomes relatively straightforward. I'm interested in the client base who you're talking to, because there is natural resistance and natural sort of skepticism in the financial services sector. And I talk about that all the time, about the sort of time it takes to adopt cloud technology and various things there that are all based around efficiency and optimization, which is
Yeah.
very much the sort of catchword of every advantage you've been talking about so far. And so when you're talking about conservatism as an industry, this is something there which has got toes in the water, which is why I think the adoption in the decentralised retail world sort of raced so much easier than it has done potentially in the institutional world. Tell us some of the sort of concerns that you come up against when you're talking to your client base, and actually then, you kind of spoken about it beforehand, but what the benefits are to businesses who are starting to take this adoption, get in there as early adopters, and I guess it still is early adoption really, isn't it? And how the proposition which you were talking about with digital assets through TP ICAP then allow people to flourish.
It's a big question.
Yeah, I know, it's about 15, so catch all of them.
Well, what I will say that we've observed is, depending on who you are as a business, there's different facets to why this might be interesting to you. Examples being, let's say you're an exchange or a liquidity provider. It's like a new asset class for people to trade, for you to provide trading products in. Expanding into new asset classes is interesting, can drive revenue, right? If you are in custody as a business, then depending on your position in, or relative position in custody, then it's either an opportunity if digital custody becomes the way forward for custody of assets in the future to maybe improve your market share if you're early to it. And if you're maybe in prime position as a custodian at the moment, then maybe it's about protection of market share in the future. I think from financial services industry, you then have people saying, well, this technology itself could help us win business in terms of asset issuance. Like we are involved in the IPO process or bondage issuance process. If it turns out that issuing onto blockchain is a more efficient way of doing things, then we're going to win more client business from that perspective. Again, I'd love to go back in time and sit in the seats of people in financial firms when electronification came around. I know I touched on that example before, but like I've had some interesting conversations recently with people around at that time, and it kind of seems obvious to us now that was going to happen, but it's amazing hearing anecdotal evidence of people just being like, oh, that's never going to work.
Gripping onto the old world.
Yeah, people are never going to trade on screen and stuff like that. And I think that, there's some comparisons there. And I think if you kind of see you can see what's possible with this technology, it's essentially a way to get an edge on your competitor, right?
And do you see that sort of the electronification of markets was game changing?
Yeah.
For many, many reasons. Do you see this as the next big electronification, sort of digitalisation of the markets from electronification, if that's even a thing?
Yeah, I think so. I think look, there are always going to be kind of iterative improvements on the markets side of things. I think this is a real step change for post-trade in general. And I think what's really interesting about it is, in isolation, if this technology existed and you relied on financial intermediaries to implement it and essentially work together to create a system that people can use, I think its chances of success would be pretty low. And I think that what is driving that forward is, the weight of energy, funding and innovation that's come from the tech sector with this, and essentially like DeFi and crypto markets, because you almost have this parallel financial market ecosystem that was built on the fly by technologists. It's been heavily funded by VCs, which has brought more talent to it. People from Silicon Valley have left to get involved in it. And because that exists, it has forced much more of a response from financial institutions, because A, it's being validated in real time and being used. I mean, I know the market cap's changed quite drastically in the last few months, but like when there's $1 trillion of value stroke hundreds of millions of dollars of value locked up in DeFi protocols, it's kind of hard to argue that it isn't something that may lead somewhere, right? Yeah. Whereas if you're sitting there as a financial institution and you're just like, hey, there's this thing called blockchain tech that came out of some of the innovation labs. Should we think about working with our peers to use it to drive inefficiencies with settlement? It's going to take a long time to materialise, right?
So it's about adopting both of them together, and I think that sort of tech aspects are really interesting. When you talk about the sort of talent, what's the opposite of an exodus? Influx. There you go, a talent influx from people. I've always thought that the interesting thing about financial services as a sector for tech talent is it's solving some of the biggest problems and most interesting problems on the planet. When you throw this into it as well, it's like a flame to the moth, isn't it, for talent to want to get involved in this, to look at it. But I'm also really interested about the talent shortage, which I think is probably a barrier to rapid growth in the space. But C, also how it evolves as quick as it is. There's not an awful lot of experience in it. You can't have someone with 15 years worth of experience in that particular space. So tell me how you guys look at talent. You're co-heading a practice over there, a part of the business. What does good talent look like to you?
Yeah, for us specifically, we prioritise excellent candidates, obviously, but I think experience in finance and understanding kind of financial market infrastructure. I guess we have a feeling that kind of crypto can be learned to some degree, and you can kind of pick up talent there. I think
you feel crypto is an easier learn than financial infrastructure.
No, I wouldn't go that far, and I don't want to draw comparisons. I think for us and what we're trying to achieve as a business, we've selected some partners that are handling the kind of the custody of assets, right? So we are slightly abstracted away from the blockchain itself. What I mean there is when we offer trading in crypto, subject to our FCA registration, which we're currently undergoing, then the kind of settlement of those assets will be done by certain partners that we've announced, people like Fidelity Digital Assets and others that we're public with, right? So to that extent, we're sort of one step mitigated from blockchain and crypto. So our needs are more around understanding how to run orderly markets, how to run execution. We have built our crypto knowledge over time by working with these partners, but if you're, as a business, directly working on blockchain tech, then I imagine you have a stronger focus on developers and engineers that understand how to do that. And when I think people talk about the squeeze in the market, I know that was particularly felt on the development side, because there's some particular expertise to dealing with blockchain tech, and that, given how overinflated the market was, that led to a hiring squeeze, right, in general. Whereas if you look at employees at financial firms that would like to get involved in crypto, there are a lot of employees in finance and a lot of people that are looking towards crypto as potentially a new area to move their career forward. And those people come with experience in financial markets, and that side of things is kind of prerequisite. So for us, finding people interested in crypto and blockchain in their private lives, that even if they don't have experience working there but have come from a financial institution, it wasn't quite as squeezed. If that
it's showcasing that desire to want to move into that space, isn't it?
And as we learn as a business, we may end up going deeper into the blockchain tech itself, and that may change the kind of profile of individual we're looking to hire.
I think the question I get asked a lot from people is, how do we move into that? What do I need to do? And I think people just sometimes expect people to see that sort of potential in them. But I think you're absolutely right. Showcasing that sort of genuine passion and interest in that space gives people pathways into an area where it doesn't necessarily have the barriers to entry if you've got the experience in the right sort of area to get into it, which I think is interesting. You asked me an interesting question beforehand I spoke about the era of convergence of TradFi and DeFi on this, on a collision course initially, but now it's sort of more of a morphing, in my opinion, between where the opportunities sit, with both sides recognising this isn't about one being better than the other or one destroying the other, but the two basically utilising the best of breed of both sectors to really thrive. Tell me what the era of convergence means to you.
That's a good question. I think if you are at a sort of crypto first firm, I think there's lessons to be learned from the way financial markets have evolved, the problems it's had, the responses, the reason why there are regulations and maybe practices like risk management, etc. And look, the crypto market has itself gone through an intense stress event in recent months, right? And that's a huge learning experience for the industry, and some firms have done
It's not its first as well, is it?
It's not its first, it won't be its last. And when you pick through the wreckage a little bit, you realise which firms maybe had better processes and which ones didn't, right? And some just get unlucky, right?
And some are just over ambitious. I mean, if you look at it and see the sort of scale of growth of some of those businesses, you think, how sustainable is it even in the best of strategies? So I think there's some strategic stuff there that overemphasises some of the issues that weren't necessarily issues with other companies who are maintaining strength and growth at different stages. I think it's really, really interesting there.
Yeah, and I mean, look, finance has had exactly the same problem, still has similar problems, but has many decades more sort of experience to build up these kind of models that should protect these things from happening. I think likewise, if you're at financial institutions, the technology, innovation, building product quickly, getting it to market quickly, there's a lot that can be learned from what have been built in crypto, and also what has been built in DeFi, right? Which is, someone described it to me as like a petri dish of innovation, that you see all these protocols thrown out kind of into the real world with like billions of dollars of capital locked up in it, and let's just see what happens, right? Yeah. Which in itself is kind of mad, but you have, everything's like on a much faster pace, right? Things go wrong quicker. Yeah. Things work. If they work, they scale really quickly, yeah. Right? But it's a huge kind of experiment that you can look at, and I think there are models there that can potentially be used in finance, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if over the next X number of years, that where there's kind of collaboration between, here are the lessons we've learned as a financial institution, here are the things that are important about capital management, risk management, this is why we have these legal protections, all of this sort of stuff. If you combine that with, hey, look what you can do with this technology, and look what you can implement with it, like out of that, if people execute well, I think you'll see things that like are very beneficial for the financial markets in general.
It's a hugely exciting, and it is the future of the financial markets as far as I'm concerned. There's so much opportunity, there's so much excitement, there's so much benefit that can come through from it, and I just love that. I think the big question is when rather than if, isn't it? It's seeing that program.
Oh yeah, I think regulators will play a big factor over the next couple of years, because there's moves in different regions to implement regulation. I think that can affect A, the pace of growth, and B, maybe the overall size that it ends up. So that's going to be really important, and I think that it's something we're focusing on a lot in general. Yeah.
Well, that's another beauty of the traditional finance world, that it can look at that and it can almost guide people through the maze of what can happen and what needs to happen to allow it to really thrive.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting.
It certainly is. It certainly is. So listen, Duncan, as I said, we could talk for hours on this, and there's probably another show to be done for sure on it all. But I'm interested in who should be reaching out to you. You're talking about this. You're a guru in the field. You've been there since the start of it all. Who should be talking to you at the moment? Who do you want to be talking to out in the marketplace, and how do they get in touch with you?
Good question. I wouldn't go so far as to call myself a guru. That's very kind of you.
I can. You can't say it. I can say it.
So you can reach us at digitalassets@tpicap.com. That's our group address. We're, as a business, looking to service our existing clients as well as sort of new clients of the firm. If you're considering crypto, you think how could it impact our business moving forward, then we'd love to chat. But mostly just excited to see other people like building in the space and trying to develop products that are going to improve finance in general moving forward.
Sounds like a plan. Well, listen, Duncan, it's been great talking to you. Thanks so much for coming on the show. And thank you all for watching. We will see you soon on another episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.